Positive observations. One is that this discussion is even taking place, and two, the sheer number of people who came to hear it. On a Friday night, this is very impressive and speaks volumes. We're here tonight because there's a problem. Problems turn into crises. And with much of my professional career and my current consulting practice focused on crisis management, I can tell you it's much easier to deal with a problem than it is with a crisis. Cornerstone of democracy, the cornerstones of democracy. Number one is free and transparent elections. Number two is a free press. Number three is economic opportunity. And four is a functioning judicial system. So what's the situation in Armenia? Serious questions have been raised as to the fairness of past elections, the absence of a free press, oligarchs who monopolize much of the economy, and a justice system which at best is considered flawed, and at worst it's considered non-existent for anyone but those with political power and connection. The diasporan Armenians must take an interest, play an active role, and help be a part of that change. So tonight's not just about discussing, it is not about sensationalizing, even as we discuss irrefutable and disturbing facts. If there's one thing I've learned from many years in American government, it's that democracy is a process. There's not really a beginning, and there isn't really an end. And even though it's still considered to be the greatest democracy in the world, you could argue that Americans are still working on our own democracy. So we should keep that in mind as we watch emerging democracies. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Simon Payaslian, and thank you all again for being here.
Thank you so very much for this wonderful opportunity to come and talk about human rights in Armenia. Obviously a very important topic and a very pressing issue, not only for Armenians in Armenia, but also for Armenians in the diaspora. But before I get to the topic, first I would like to say my special thanks to Ara Aras for his time and energy initiating this entire process of organizing this event. Thanks to Catherine Manwelian for preparing the flyers and for her time and help. Thank you very much. And thanks to Mr. Bartak Abro for his kind invitation to his radio program to discuss democracy and human rights in Armenia. And thanks to Professor Denis Papazian for his years of encouragement and support. Thank you. And many thanks to the sponsoring organizations. This apparently, and I don't know much about the New Jersey community, but apparently this is a very lively, dynamic, successful community. And you really have your leaders to thank for the type of organizational community life that you have. This is just absolutely wonderful. I wish I could move to New Jersey. This is an important event, and who knows, may even become the first step toward a greater engagement by the diaspora to promote democracy and human rights in Armenia. Clearly, the type of leadership we have here, we can very easily and with a lot of confidence say that the future of the diaspora, at least here in this community in the United States, it's in good hands. And the challenge is, and this is what we're talking today, is to be able to somehow transfer your energies, your wisdom, your knowledge, your expertise, your energy to begin to influence events in Armenia for modern societies. You can't go back to Ashti Shah, the Shah Divan. in order to run your societies in the 20th, 21st century. But
this system of corruption has in many ways empowered and enriched elected government officials and top-level bureaucrats. They have become insular to possible dangers and have developed false notion of invincibility. Accordingly, without outside prodding, the Armenian leadership has few incentives to change anything radical in how the government conducts business. Allegations of large-scale corruption and election fraud are presented by some in the diaspora as if it were something to be expected. This position is counterproductive and has made things only worse on the ground. Armenia has the necessary human capital both within its borders and in the diaspora, and institutional foundations to be a well-governed country with a stable and secure economy. All that's left for us to do is to implement it.
Right now we are having 70,000 people. It was results in 2010. In 7 months, 70,000 people left the country for good. And every third young person in Armenia is thinking of the future abroad. And together with this, if I add some other numbers, that we are #1 after China in the world with gender-based abortions. Okay, and in some 20 years, it means you will have 15,000 fewer women than men, and etc., etc. So. If you put these numbers together and plus understand the rest of it that I'm going to tell you now, that we are really in a risky situation that after 20 years of independence, we are having a map, we are having a spot on the map called Armenia, but we are not sure how many people live there, what kind of country it is. Since that, like 5 years ago, it was like that. So every year we are losing about 80, 70, 40, this year it was 30 something. I think that you can do a lot with changing the situation and understanding that genocide issue is not the only issue, and it cannot go without bringing the Armenian today's issue up. Otherwise we will end up having genocide recognized by all the countries and no Armenia anymore. Thank you very much. I would love to hear your questions.
Approach with the idea that we should use our political capital, the Armenian American community, the political capital that we harvest through organization, through donations, through volunteering, through our votes and other means, right, should be directed toward the U.S. government with the instruction that the U.S. government address injustice in Armenia, right? It's a pretty idea. Actually, at the surface, you might think, well, geez, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice if we took our political power and gave that tool, that hammer, that leverage to the State Department, and they would go over to Yerevan and beat Serge Sarkisian on the head and tell him, set things right. Except that's a fantasy. That is a fantasy. The fantasy is that the U.S. government cares about democracy in Armenia. I'll tell you some stories later if you like. They don't care about democracy in Armenia. They care about isolating Armenia from Iran, separating Armenia from Russia, delivering Caspian oil, and getting Turkey into the pocket. That is their mission. And any leverage that you provide those guys, they're sons of guns. I deal with them all the time, every single day. They're sons of guns. They'll take that leverage and they'll twist it and use it against the very purposes that you would hope they'd be used for.
Who's going to stop them? There is really nobody to stop them from doing so. There is no internal pressure, there is no external pressure, and if you have government officials that decide to act in a certain way and they think they will benefit from that act, they will. Because the whole idea of the rule of law, that concept, the principle of rule of law, it's very much like I was saying, it's not even part of their political culture. That's not where they're coming from. Their mindset is that we finally get rid of the Soviet regime, the Communist Party, the communist system. Now we have brought in market economy, free enterprise, individual initiative, You want free enterprise? I go out there and steal as much as I can. That's my free enterprise. The government officials go out there, kill, survival of the fittest. Good old 19th century ideology.
The diaspora could have a very influential input in Armenians' everyday life if they really organize and prioritize and think what they're going to do. Unfortunately, diaspora is disorganized, and diaspora is not one homogeneous entity. There are variances, Askahais, and that causes its own problem.
Local front and here in the diaspora, I thought that one ray of hope was the mobilization over what happened with one of the members of our community, Nadek Archunyan. And that to me was one example of how we were able to have a unified front. Maybe it was a very specific situation, but we did seem to create a lot of momentum. But what I want to know, and maybe Garo can answer this, like what happened to that momentum? In other words, Nadek was released, and why we really don't know if it was because of all of the efforts on the diaspora's side or the Armenian side, but like, what can we do with the momentum on just that one case, and to see if we can continue to work in a unified fashion? Because I don't think that case is over.
No, the case is not over. It's actually far from being over. What prompted here the outcry was actually the arrest. But the arrest seems to me was thought out to be more of a pressure tactic than actual criminal case or incarceration. The pressure tactic was to have, well, they didn't just arrest Nadek, they arrested two other people. They arrested the director or vice president and the chief accountant. And what's interesting is actually the chief accountant's arrest. I was actually in court on the day that the arrest happened. I arrived in court about 8 o'clock, and Nadek and Ani, who was the vice president, had already had their judgment of 2 months incarceration. But they still had the accountant up in chambers, which was closed doors, so I couldn't actually, nobody actually could go and hear what was going on. And they kept him there till 12 o'clock, 12:30 at night. So that's like an additional 4.5 hours. Well, the tactic was to pressure the guy. By the way, the accountant has epilepsy. He's an invalid. And so also physically weak. And I guess their intention was to pressure the accountant to give testimony against Nadek. Didn't work, but they worked on the poor guy for 4 hours. And at 12:30, same judgment was passed on to them. Now, the judgment, interestingly enough, was based on incarceration, if I'm not mistaken, and Saro is in the audience, he may correct me. Saro Hartunyan, brother of Nadek, is in the audience, so if I'm incorrect, you can...
He wants to say.
Right. The initial proceedings were for tax evasion and money laundering. That case was in court, and they were waiting for the court to make a decision on it. But there was still investigation going on, and they were still calculating whether Nadek does owe that money or not. The court didn't make the decision yet, but in order to use scare tactics, they had an ex-employee claim that Nadek, the vice president, who was a 26-year-old girl, and that guy with the epilepsy scared them or threatened them in the street with violence if they testified against Nadek. So based on that threat, they found them to be dangerous to
power
society.
are essentially immune to one-time protests. They know that you're going to yell and scream, you're going to go away for 364 days, and you're going to show up again and yell and scream again. The trick to real influence is sustainability and institutionalization. The trick is to institutionalize your power so the people you're targeting know that you're not going away, and you target their fears and you hit them at the leverage points that are going to, can cause them
Today,
potential.
as an update, my family has put together all the facts of these of years past of what happened, and it's a packet of evidence that would stand up in the Armenian court, or would stand up in the European court, or in the American court. I mean, evidence is evidence, facts are facts. But what concerns me, and confuses me, but what more concerns me, is when past and present employees are forced to give false testimony. And my hope is that we will find a way to have an impartial court to look at our case, and that's what I would like to say. That's my hope. Go out there and really demonstrate what really happened on an impartial way, because because we're all looking for validation, right? I mean, this is Sara and Narek's case and Hartunian's case, but there's many such cases, and we're looking for validation. We're looking for confirmation of what are the values that brings us forth. Today I spoke with Narek, and I said, Narek, we'll get done. Where are we going? I mean, I'm worried about him. I'm an older brother and a father, and I'm worried about Narek and the likes of Narek. And Narek said, nowhere. Nowhere in the sense that I'm staying here. I'm convincing everybody in Yerevan and Hayastan to work for the country, to not give in to despair, to try to work on reform. And I'm not going anywhere. He said, Arachastval Saro, because we're right and it's going to be right. That's how he finished. He also asked me to give you a message. He sends you his positive energy. He said, give the audience my creative spirit and I just want to thank everyone for supporting me on this basis. So Narek is fighting. He's there, but his main message is: we stay, we help, we build, and we look at how to transform our country into where it's supposed to go according to our vision.